This is my mealworm farm. I originally created this for my chickens, but having eaten insects in several different countries, I decided to keep the mealworms for myself. So let me show you what mealworms look like. Don't forgive the wobbly camera, I'm not using a tripod today, or a lavalier microphone. So, what you can see here is the beetle that the mealworm grows into. These beetles will expand in size and they lay 500 eggs each. Now there's a live mealworm. Just kind of follow my finger. So that's a mealworm. So the eggs grow through they hatch into very small worms and they form a hard coating around them, which you can see many empty shells in here. Much like a pupae of a caterpillar. But yeah. So a lot of people will use this stage of the mealworm for their chickens, but I like to let them grow and form their eggs. Let's give the box a bit of a shake up, get things moving a bit. So a lot of these are just empty skin. So when the mealworms grow too large for their skin, they shed their skin, and it's just like that, so it's just paper. Eventually, the mealworms will hatch into these beetles. Now there's a dead one. So these dead beetles have laid their eggs and then they die. And the good thing about it is that these mealworms will actually eat the bodies of the dead worms. So this is a completely self-sustaining, non-wasting system. So what do I feed them? Well, the majority of what I feed them is simply rice bran. This is one of the cheapest things you can possibly buy. I buy it in massive, large bags, which only cost me a few dollars. I also throw in anything in the cupboard that is getting a bit towards its use-by date. For example, you can see a lot of rolled oats in here. So mealworms were generally considered a pest. But did you know that after all my mealworms, so I originally started with 100 grams of mealworms for $10. So I let those mealworms grow, and as you can see, a lot of them have already gone to the beetle phase. That one's trapped upside down. So each beetle will lay 500 eggs. So in the end, I'm going to have around about 20,000 mealworms. And that 20,000 mealworms will all grow into beetles. So I'll have 20,000 beetles, which will lay 500 eggs. So as you can see, they grow exponentially fast. So the trick is not to harvest your mealworms early. They have a 6-month life cycle from egg hatch to beetle maturity and egg lay. So this does not happen overnight. The beetles will generally stay on top, and I simply used a drill to put holes through a sealed container lid. And that's enough that's enough air holes to keep them alive. What you want to do is be careful you don't put them anywhere where you get ants, because ants will be attracted to these guys as well. We don't want them falling prey to ants, so keep an eye on what's going on. And if you see ants, move them. Do not spray insecticide anywhere near the mealworms. Do not put them near toxic herbs. Do not put them near anything poisonous in your house. Now, we have a completely non-poison, poison-free house. We don't use insecticides. We use vinegar and essential oils. I have to be very careful I don't put this anywhere near peppermint oil or any of the stronger oils that are known to cause irritation to insects, irritation or death. So I generally keep these insects moving around the house. At the moment, they're living right beside our breakfast cereal. Before, they were living next to my soap, but the ants found them. So they get moved around. So as soon as all these beetles have hatched and there's no more mealworms, then I'm going to spread this across 5 very large boxes, plastic boxes. I think they're called storage boxes now. And we need about 2 inches of bran in the box to give them plenty of depth. Now, you can stack the boxes, but just make sure when you stack them you don't block the air holes. So after about 2 or 3 years, we should be seeing harvests in the many kilogram range. Now, what can you do with mealworms? Well, first of all, these mealworms are clean because they're eating clean bran and they're not exposed to the environment outside. So, the best way to eat a mealworm, if we can find one in here, that's still wiggling around. That's a pupae, there's one. So let's pull him out. Okay, so that's a mealworm. So the best way to have a mealworm is wait till they reach at least this size and then put them in an oven at about 100 degrees Celsius and simply dry them out. So it will kill them and it will dry them. So you can eat them just like this, but that's kind of disgusting for most Westerners, because most Westerners think insects are dirty. Well, they're not dirty, it's just something new. So, the best way to eat them, if you're a Westerner, is to get a whole bunch of these dried mealworms, put them into your mortar and pestle, grind them up into flour, then bake a cake with them. Make some bread with them. They have exactly the same nutrient footprint as steak, the same protein, minerals, and vitamins. Yet they require no water, no petrol, no chemicals, no sprays. They are the cheapest protein on the planet. Insect farming is the way of the future. I suggest that if you have your stomach churning by the thought of eating insects, that you really explore some of the things online. There is a great video called Can Eating Insects Save the World? I'll see if I can link it to the end of this YouTube video. I want you to watch it. So other things you can farm very easily are grasshoppers. Now, grasshoppers are farmed extremely easily. They eat similar foods, but I don't have a grasshopper farm running at the moment, but I will soon. This was simply an experiment to see how viable starting a mealworm farm was, and as you can see, it's extremely successful. So where do you buy mealworms? Well, most pet stores will sell insects. They'll sell mealworms and they'll sell grasshoppers because people keep lizards and lizards eat insects. Also fish. So if you can find a pet store that sells live mealworms and live crickets, you have the very basis of your farm. So depending how fast you want to expand your farm, you can simply do as I do and start with $10 of live mealworms, or you could perhaps use $100 of live mealworms and use a box 10 times this size. Either way, what you have is going to be worth money to you. It's either going to be money as a protein replacement, so you don't have to buy milk or cheese or meat, or it's going to be food for your livestock. And you can think of many uses for insect farming. It is, as you can see, a fantastic way to dispose of all the stale and out-of-date grains in your cupboard. I've not yet tried these on flour, but I plan to mix some flour into this, but be sure to use plain flour. Don't use self-raising flour, because self-raising flour has other chemicals in it. So play around with your insects, and remember that when you dry them, you're killing any bugs that might be on them. Of course there's none because you've raised them yourself. So you're sterilizing them, and then you simply grind them into flour. You can grind almost any insect into flour. Grasshoppers and mealworms particularly make fantastic flour. This is the food of the future. If you have ever spent time in Asia, you would realize that this has been food for thousands of years. It is street food, it is sold everywhere. And it is no different to you eating a hamburger or a pie and chips. What is normal in your culture is very different in other cultures. So, unfortunately, a lot of people in the West were raised to think that insects were dirty and yucky, and they're not. Insects are an amazing protein source, and if you can get your head around a change to understand that insects are not gross, but they are actually the food of the future. This is what's going to sustain you when beef is too expensive, when it's too expensive to eat meat, when you can't afford to eat. If you have insects, you can not only turn them to food, but you can turn them to money. Simply 100 grams of mealworms is worth 10 Australian dollars at the pet store. 100 grams. The bigger the mealworms, the less there are for the 100 grams. So, whilst you think this might be yucky, you may still want to do it to make some money. It is a great way to get your children into being young entrepreneurs, and it is a wonderful way to increase the food of what you make, the protein in the food of what you make. I don't know about you, but I find this completely fascinating to watch. A self-sustaining community living on leftovers from the back of my cupboard, turning themselves into the protein equivalent of steak. Where else can you get that? Nowhere.